On today's video, we're going to talk about springs and shocks for a B-Mod. All about the B-Mod setup. More on that when we get back. Hey, on this video, we're going to cover the complete package on a B-Mod setup. But before we get started, let's talk about subscribing and liking our channel. We did make it to the 4,000 before Boone Super Nationals as was our goal. So I thank you so much because it's a big number for us. This is a small deal. We're trying to help people be better at racing. Trying to help them to understand the things they need to understand to become a better racer. And we're just doing it to help people, so basically we're doing it for free. So I am a numbers guy, so I like the numbers. That's why I push that deal. I do like the numbers. I want to see this channel grow. I want to see our videos get a lot of views and likes. So thanks again for all you do. Keep racing great, people. All right. On this video, the B-Mod setup. We're going to cover from ride heights to spring locations to spring rates, shock valving, scale numbers. We're going to try to cover it all tonight. Okay, so stick in there. I just realized, we did a hobby stock one, we did a stock car one, and I honestly thought we'd already done the B mods and the A mods, but I kind of looked through the list of videos and I'm like, hey, we need to do this thing. We are so good in the B mod market that it's a shame, and I apologize. So today, let's start B mods. We're going to start with the ride heights. I like to check ride heights. I'm going to say I'm a little old school, old fashioned. I like to scale my cars. I like to use a load stick. I like to measure the ride heights at the center bolt on a B mod. So we're going to cover B mod being a USRA B mod, an IMCA B mod, or Northern Sport mod, a UMP B mod, and just kind of a general outlaw B mod. Okay. So the same bases or principles can apply to a low horsepower A-Mod car, but we will also cover that A-Mod deal, crate, and open motors in the next video. Ride heights, center of the bolt to the ground, right front, 7.5, left front, 7 5/8. Okay, this is a little lower than what we've talked about on other videos. Okay, but it's a good starting point. Number one, with the ride heights, if you're at these ride heights and you're on these spring rates and your car hits the ground, we have to raise it up. Don't give me that it hits once in a while. If the paint is coming off the frame, if your car is hitting the ground, we have to get it up. Okay, there's no speed and being on the racetrack, none whatsoever at all. So let's get it up. The right rear, we're going to set the right rear ride height per chassis recommendation. So if it's top of the axle to the bottom of the, top of the axle to the bottom of the frame, if the chassis guy says 12 inches, 12, 12 and a half, 11, 11 and a half, wherever, that's what we want to set. That is chassis dependent. If you have an older chassis and you don't know your ride heights, then the 7 5/8, and I will explain later in this video how to determine where the right rear needs to be. Okay, so if you don't know your ride heights, once you get that figured out, then you can apply the same on the left rear. Okay, on a left rear that we're preloading the spring, we're not going to set a ride height. But when we scale the car initially, we need the car in the rear setting at ride height. We need about an inch and a half of rake in the car, rear being higher. So that ride height on the right rear is dictated by the chassis guy. If you don't have one, we'll discuss later in the video again how to determine that. Spring location, left rear spring. If you're a USRA B mod, I would say on a slider in front of the axle. If you're an IMCA car, of course, you're going to be on top. That's the rule. 13-inch spring has to be ½ inch off the axle tube on the spring on top. That's IMCA modified sport mod. Right rear spring in this area on a USRA car, the right rear spring is 90% of the time on top. You go up north, you get into upper Iowa, Minnesota area, and I'm going to say most of them are moving it to a slider in front. Spring behind, we have a car we're racing this year by a northern manufacturer that recommended that we do spring behind, and it was actually great until it was horrible, and then we went to spring on top. So it did work for a while. I have no idea why, but it did run for about 4 weeks, and then it just went to complete pot. We over traveled the right rear. We was on way too soft of a spring rate, but for the first 4 weeks, something was bound up in the car, I guess. Right rear, like I said, on top is not my favorite. It comes with limitations. The pivot point's awful high, but it is generally seen as what's going to push the right rear tire into the ground the hardest. So most guys seem to think that is the best right rear available option. And I don't know. I don't know that it's the worst, but it definitely isn't the best in my opinion. As the track slicks off, then it becomes harder. It can be overcome with some weight placement and or a shorter spring. But spring location, USRA B mod spring on top. In this area, 90% of the people are going to run it that way. IMCA Northern Sport Mod forced on top. If you're somewhere else, and you're racing like a UMP, not so much a pro mod, but even in a pro mod deal, you might as well reduce the drive factor. So springs in front, yeah, it's not going to make a ton of drive, but it allows the car to handle. Spring location, spring rates. We'd start right front, 500 to 550. Left front, 550 to 600. Right rear, we're going to be 225, 13, 250, 13, or R230, 250, 13. If we're in a car, spring on top, and we're at some horrible racetracks, Cortez, Colorado is not an open track, I don't believe. I believe it is an IMCA track, so this wouldn't apply. But if you're at a slow, dirty racetrack, then an 11-inch spring will raise your roll centers, or your center of gravity, and lower your spring table height, and would be a better option. If you're on 11-inch spring, you probably need to be on maybe a 250. If you're carrying speed into the corner, and you're really getting into the 1.5, 2 Gs of lateral force, you're probably going to need to be about 25 pounds heavier on 11-inch spring than what you think or what you'd normally run. So normally we're in a 225, 250 range right rear. The left rear, same on a IMCA spring on top. We'd be the same, probably start on a 225, 13. The left rear, on a USA car, we're going to be probably starting in the 175, 13-inch on a slider. We have options over there to, cage it. Our slider can produce a spring cage very well. That's a very good setup. If we can be in an environment where we preload it, then we'd be on a 125 and we'll be preloaded. And we would be around 180 to start. If we're on the cage, I guess the best way, most people don't understand a spring cage setup. So if you don't understand that, probably is the easiest to call. We have to sell that. It's most of the time we sell it assembled, spring and slider preset. If you want to do it yourself, feel free to. A 7541 is an excellent slider to use for a cage. The whole pattern and everything is ready to rock and roll. So 175/13 on a slider in front. That's the way I'd be. Of course, you're going to be spring on top. I still would be on a sport mod. I'd still be in that 175/200 spring rate. That car is probably going to come off the bars. If you're thinking about preloading the left rear on a sport mod, an IMCA car, just forget it. I think it's not a good idea. I think this is the only time I think it's a bad idea. But the car's just not set up well for it. And there are guys doing it, and there's guys that claim that they are doing it well. And I struggle because I don't understand it, and I ask for that to be explained, and I never can get an explanation. So either they're hiding the biggest secret in racing, or maybe they're not racing as well on it as they kind of think they are. So wheel loads. Wheel loads, there is no magic wheel load. So I can't say, okay, 600 on the right front, 750 on the left front. I can't say this is the wheel load. It's going to work for every car out there. Okay. It's not. That number is so dependent on many things: ride height, spring rate, lowers, the car. In this case, we have to run Chevelle frame, Chevelle lower, stock length. We have no option. That's it. So load numbers, what you need to do is get your car at ride height, get your car scaled out, get your preload set on the right rear, have your bite number, your left side, have everything perfect in your car, then put a load stick on and see what your load numbers are. Those are your load numbers, and that's going to be the load numbers you are. Understand that load number isn't a wheel load number. That ain't what it is. It is a ride height number. It is a ride height expressed in pounds. So we have given up a tape measure for a device that measures height in pounds. That's what a load stick is. It's measuring your ride height in poundage, right front, left front. If you want to understand what those numbers are, I highly recommend that you get a load stick, and at this point, put it on the right front, take the slack out, jack the car up, there's your load number. Okay, if you want to run her down to a 3-inch number, that number is what keeps you off the racetrack. And from here on out, you can establish, so let's say we're 600 at ride height and we're 1,500 at 3 inches. Okay, car doesn't hit the racetrack. And we feel like the car is down in a good posture. We're happy with all that. If we have to change the spring rate because we are going to a different track or different track configurations, and we feel like the car is getting slow, or it's middle of summer and the car is slowed down a bunch, and we feel like we need to lower the car, a lot of times we can lower the car on that 500, 550 right front spring and be fine because the track slowed down. But that 3-inch number is the number, whatever spring we put in, that is going to keep the car off the racetrack. So utilize that number. It's not live or die, but it's a good number to have. But it's going to be semi-specific to your car. So the bottom line is call your chassis guy. He will not tell you, most likely he will not tell you a load number, whether you don't want to or you don't have it, or whatever his reason is. I don't know, but I do know that you don't get that number a lot from people. And even if you do, it's not that great of a number. It's a number they gave you that might work at their track, but it doesn't mean it's going to work at your track. So build your own number. Okay, that's what you're supposed to be doing here. Build your own number. Right rear, at ride height, 375 to 400 pounds of load on that spring. Okay, 13-inch spring minus the height that it is in the car. We're going to put a tape measure on it. We're going to measure it. So if it was 13 inches, 11 inches, that's 2 inches times the rate of the spring, 225, gives you the load. I will show an example of that. I will post a link to an example and the notes to this video on our website and our blog. I'll post a link down below for that so you can understand that. I also post a link for information on how to measure your preload for your left rear. I think most of you guys understand that, but for the first-time viewers, first-time users, this is how you do it. Look at the links below, and that'll explain. 375 to 400 right rear at ride height. Okay, if you can't get there, I'll post another link. It shows 2 in, 2 out, 1 in, 1 out. This allows you to move weight around the car. So if the car was a plane and it had 4 tires on it, somewhere is the center of gravity. I call that a bucket of lead, and that bucket's moving across the car in this fashion, and we want to get that bucket a certain distance from the right rear. By setting the right rear load at 375 to 400, that means that weight is positioned in a good spot to make the car work. It won't overwork the right rear, it won't underwork the right rear. The right rear needs to adhere to the racetrack as we go through the corner to get the car through the corner. Okay, we don't need to be toting the left front, and we don't need to be all jacked up on the right rear. So too little a load, we'll tote the left front. Too much load, we're probably going to spin the tire. Too little a load, we won't make it out exit before we run out of load. So 375 to 400 must be at ride height. Cannot have a preload spring in the left rear. If that's what you're doing, cannot have a preload spring in the left rear when you're setting the right rear load, or the right front ride height, or the left front ride height. Do never, ever, ever scale a car with a preload spring in it. I don't care what the car is, don't do it. Left rear, if you're running, if you're able to run a 125/16, after you got the car scaled out, put the 125 in, jack it to the chain. IMCA, you don't have a chain, but you can run against the end of the shock. Guys call all the time, is it safe to run against the end of the shock? Absolutely. I feel confident in saying that with every brand of shock. I think you can run against the chain. If you bang it real hard, it may cause damage over time, but what's your other option? If you got a chain, put a chain on the left rear. The chain on the left rear is absolutely the best crutch on the market. It really is. It gets the car to the same height. It gets the car to the same load. It gets the car to the same rear steer, and it gets the car to the same left rear position. So it puts a ton of consistency in the car that you don't get any other way. So after 20 laps, you hit it 40 times, you can probably get out of the car and say, this is what it's doing. But if you go out and race 20 laps and you have 40 different left rear heights with 40 different loads, possibilities, maybe they're not, maybe there are some laps that are the same, but you come back in and you're like, I don't know what the car's really doing. Okay, or you get it wrong. So the chain puts a ton of consistency in the car. If you're not running one and you can run it, by all means, run it. It's great. But if you're going to run an extended load number on a 125, you have to top it out. So 185, 225, that's the range that we want to be in for loads on that. So right rear load, let's go back and cover that. Right rear load, again, at ride height. So it's 13 inches minus the 375, gives you an inch and 5/8. Okay, you take the inch and 5/8 times the rate, and that'll give you the load. Okay, pretty simple. I do it with a tape measure. I do it with a tape measure because it's simple. Okay, and it's not screwed up. Just simple. If you was on a coilover doing a load on the right rear, yes, you're going to get a different number from a smasher to a tape because you have to take in consideration the rod force and the shock. The rod force and the shock is still being applied. Let's just void that out. Our height, our current height minus our free height times the rate. It's the height of the spring. So remember, when you're measuring that, don't go on top of the cup and the bottom of the cup. It's between the cups, okay? Because we don't need to add or lose that so much 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch of measurement there. Inside a cup, the inside of the cup, that's the height. Does every spring come out at 13 inches? Absolutely not. Okay, and when you take that measurement, you're going to be a little off with the tape measure. You're going to be a little off with the original spring height. So the number is going to be a little off, but it isn't any different than any other measurement or adjustment on the car. If you need more right rear, put a little more right rear in it. Okay, put a turn in. If you feel like you got too much, take a turn out. Same thing in the left rear. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be at a number that you understand, at a measurement you understand. Okay, so get your loads, get them in the car, and get them set. Shock valving. Shock valving is, we're going to do the shock valving and then we'll do the options, okay? Because the shock valving on Northern Sport Mod and a USRA B Mod are going to be very, very close, okay? And the variance in some of this is personal preference, okay? Whether I just really like a car that's tied down or I really like a car that's jacked up hard in the left rear. These are personal preferences. There are a certain amount of things that need to happen. And some guys can get away with it. You know, he doesn't drive a B mod, but one guy that really comes to mind is Mike Nichols. I feel like Mike can get a car around the racetrack better without having to crutch the car with valving than anybody out there, you know. So, I mean, I don't think his valving has to be as severe as like the rest of us. I think the rest of us need a little help, and there's no shame in that. We just valve the car to make the car as good as it can go around the racetrack. So, right front. Now, I'm going to give you my valving and how we do our valving, 0-point call outs, and I'll give you a generic number. So, right front, we're going to put a right front GF 300 /130 at 100 psi. I'll put this in the description below too. This would be a 12 rebound shock for us. Okay, everybody's scale number is going to be different. Look up the universal chart if you want to see what that would be. Left front. Okay, so yes, we can have other options on the right front. I'm just going to give you the baseline. It's going to vary, but the baseline setup. Left front 1-75 /160 at 100 psi. So this is 6 rebound, 3 compression, has low speed nose in it, has car control. It is of the medium bleed family. The right front GF is of the small bleed family. Okay, right rear 1-40. So understand on a call out, right front, left front, right rear. Those 3 corners, when they're called out, right rear 1-40, as the number gets bigger, 40, 50, 60, 75, the rebound gets bigger, okay? That's the 1-inch number, dynoed at 10 inches. That's the 1-inch number. Right rear 1-40 /110 is a 6 rebound, 1.5 compression, 100 pounds of gas, okay? Standard gas shock 15 series is legal for USRA. 20 series is also legal for USRA, but the 15-20 series are both legal in the IMCA car. No doubts, no questions. Typically, we do a 15 series because it gives us options with the base valve that we don't have in the 20 series. That's why we use it. Left rear. We're going to build a stiff left rear for these cars. We're not going to build the stiffest left rear that's buildable, but we're going to build a stiff left rear. So we're going to probably start around the left rear 1-75 550. Okay, that shock is going to mandatorily have an SRT in it. If you need a little less stiff, then we'd probably back down to a 6400 or maybe a 5400. But they're all going to have SRTs in it. That 550 pushes us out about a 10 compression, 2 rebound number. The options would be SRT, piston, and base valve. Okay, if you're on a rough track or the track has a lot of sheep's foot holes in it, or it's just really slick with texture, then the SRT is going to perform and function super well. It is designed for rougher tracks, but even in a slick or smooth environment, it creates traction because it's not allowing the car to have to process that, high-speed bump oil. The car is in posture, it's in a position, and we go through a hole, and now all of a sudden we have to shake the whole thing down, and it becomes pretty rough. Or the SRT piston can allow it to bypass, and car goes on down the track. The base valve, if we're going to do a base valve right now, we're kind of doing right side base valves, SRTs left sides. That's just kind of what we've been doing. And that has worked very, very well. The base valve, our base valve is different. It really performs well. We need to be putting it in more classes, in more shocks. It's a great option, people. Places like Wheatland, Missouri, probably places where Arrowhead, places where it's hard to get a hold of the racetrack, where the racetrack's a little slick and dirty. The base valve reduces the lag time that the shock has. A gas shock, a low gas pressure shock, creates a lag on the compression stroke, which hurts traction and feel. So the base valve deal, really good. There are things about a base valve that you need to understand, you need to know, and it may not push the shaft out all the way. It just depends. And people are like, oh, it don't work. It's not right. It's broke, because they don't really remember what they got when they got it. And now it's not shafting out. Well, there's a good chance it won't shaft out because it doesn't have enough gas pressure to build rod force to push the shock all the way out. And if the shock has a lot of rebound in it, then it's going to struggle even more. So the base valve is a great option for you guys, but it comes and needs knowledge. So understand that. Preloading the rear springs. We've already talked about the right rear load. It's very important that it's at ride height. Can be done with the tape measure. I got links below to explain it. The left rear load extended against the chain. I kind of did explain it earlier. But what I'll do is I'll take a little time right now to explain the pivot point and the ride height if you don't have the ride height for your particular car. So on the right rear, with a standard left rear, we're on the scales, our fronts are right. We're kind of trying to figure out where this ride height should be, okay? And we're going to say we're on a slider. So if you measure from center of the axle to center of the shock mount on the 3-link mount on the right rear, it should be 6 inches. Center of axle to the mount, 6 inches down. From center to the upper mount should be less than 20. Okay, so if you can't figure out your ride heights, do this and set it around 20. Measure stuff, top of the axle, bottom of the frame, should be in the 12-ish area. Okay, look at the car and say, oh, it's got 3 inches of rake in it. Okay, so every car is not going to be built that way, but if you're at 1.5 inches rake and you're at 19 inches center to center and you're on a 6-inch drop, you're in a good spot, okay? If you're spring on top and maybe that shock mount, that front mount's not there, same would be true if the 3-link mount's level with the rear. Now, if the frame's running downhill back there, then you have to take that, you're gonna have to look at that. But your pivot point, if you're on a 6-inch drop, your pivot point will run about 21.5 to 22.5 in that range. So it would be center of the nut that's welded in. That's your pivot point. And you have to deal with that. So that's how you can figure out your ride height. And then whatever you get for ride height on the right rear. So let's say it's 12, and you've got a 200-pound spring in or 175 and you're scaling the car, you could be 12.5 over here. So you got a little dynamic wedge in the car, getting it tilted to the right front. This would be a good area, a good spot to be measuring your ride heights from. Scale numbers. Now, what we're really going to look for is a 53.5 to 54.5 left, a 54 to 56 rear. Understand both cars, IMCA, UMP, USRA, understand this. We're in a low horsepower situation. So if you're at some goofy racetrack and you have to point and shoot, dime in the corner, drag race off, then build left rear into the car. Okay. But if you're at all the other tracks in the country, you got to carry momentum. This is not a drive car. This is very much a momentum car. The car that turns in the corner with the fastest speeds and carries that speed through the corner is the guy that's going to win the race. And I guarantee you that dude is going to be freer on the right rear. If you're some tied up race car and you're winning races because you're real tight in the left rear, then you're racing against a bunch of guys that are also very, very tight, or you're just the best one there, okay? Because these are not typically fast race cars in today's world. You get up against the tougher guys in the USRA B-Mod world, and you are going to have a free car. You're going to have to be freed up. And this next coming weekend, there's a big B-Mod race in Oklahoma, and I guarantee you the guy that wins that race or the guys that win their A qualifiers, they are not going to be tight. They are going to be free. So right front, I'm going to throw some numbers out. This is going to give you a 2450, 2460 total weight driver in the car, 500-pound right front, 575 left front, 660 right rear, 725 left rear. That's 2460, 40 to 100 pounds of bite is doable. We don't need the car to be much tighter. We don't need to be any tighter. Cross around 40 to 51%. We are looking for a car that will turn on the front tires when you turn the steering wheel. Okay? We do not need a ton of driving these cars. We need the cars to turn. We want the car to respond to the steering wheel and the rear tires to push the car forward so we can turn the car anywhere we need to be and maintain our mile per hour. Okay. This is the setup for the B-Mod. If you have questions or you didn't understand something, give me a call, 620-326-3152 at the shop, Monday through Fridays. See us at the racetracks. Whatever we can do to help, let us help. Watch these videos, tell your friends about these videos, and tell them how it's helping you. I mean, somebody calls every day and thanks, had a guy come in today, walked through the front door, knew who I was because he's been watching the videos. And the first thing out of his mouth was thanks, thanks for helping, and I appreciate that. I really do. It means a lot to me that people are learning, and if 5 years, 10 years down the road when I call it done, if we can say, hey, we made racing better because you guys watch these videos and you learn from them, then super great. Thumbs up, because that's what we want. We're not really trying to sell you something other than speed and knowledge. So God bless you people. God bless America. Go to the racetrack, support your local track. Enjoy it. Take your kids. Get them involved, because racing is not only a sport, but it is a rolling science project. It is, you have to learn from what you did in order to get better. You do an experiment and you evaluate the experiment and you decide what the next step is. That's how you become great in racing. It's just like science. So it's just like school. Who would have known, God bless you. Go left and be fast, and we'll see you the next time.